Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Microsoft Copilot, what it is, what it's not, and how it can help you. This is presented today by Elantis Solutions. Let's take a look at the agenda for today. So in today's session, we're going to provide an overview of AI, and we're going to take a deeper dive into Copilot. We have 3 demos that are spread throughout the presentation today, so you'll want to stay tuned right till the end so you don't miss any of those demonstrations of some of the different capabilities of Copilot in Microsoft as well as in other applications. We'll also talk a little bit about some specific use cases and ways you could use Copilot and some lessons learned from how we've been using this for ourselves and for our customers. And as I mentioned, we'll have Q&A. We'll have some time throughout and at the end. So feel free, again, to put your questions in the chat and in the Q&A. To present these topics today, I have with me Julian Charles. Julian is an enterprise architect at Elantis. Julian has over 20 years experience in the IT industry, and throughout that time, he's really specialized in Microsoft technologies, and he's absolutely fantastic at using this experience to advise clients on how they can modernize their organization through technology. He's very skilled at creating a technology vision and supporting clients throughout their digital transformation, and in particular, we see that transformation happening right now with AI. So really excited to have Julian here with us to present on this topic. So thank you again, Julian, for joining us, and to all our audience for joining us today on Microsoft Copilot, what it is, what it's not, and how it can help you. And when you're ready, Julian, please take it away.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Amy. I'm not sure I've ever heard myself articulated as well as that. It's a pleasure to be with everybody today. As you mentioned, Julian Charles, we're going to take an overview of AI and Microsoft Copilot first. We're going to introduce what AI is and what its role really is in enhancing productivity. Before we start, I'd like to set the stage and kind of break down Microsoft M365 into its distinct pillars. We find that this brings forth a multitude of benefits from an operational, a governance, and an innovation perspective, where each pillar serves as a focused domain addressing specific aspects of the M365 ecosystem. Because Copilot seamlessly integrates into the comprehensive ecosystem of tools and services to enhance productivity across the suite in Dynamics 365, as well as Azure Data, Analytics, and more, we've positioned it under Azure. And data analytics, which Copilot leverages, it also leverages machine learning, cognitive services, and the bot framework. So what you're looking at here, everything that is highlighted in Elantis orange is basically our talk track for today. We'll be touching on these various components. Now, the benefit of having distinct pillars and breaking the ecosystem down into those pillars is basically it doesn't overwhelm the organization, and it gives you an idea of where the central focus is going to be. That provides operational benefits via clarity and focus, as well as resource allocation, making sure that resources can be allocated efficiently to manage various pillars. It also associates some risk mitigation, separating security, compliance, and identity management into a foundational pillar allows for a rigorous risk assessment. So when we look at the pillars 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we've also got our foundational pillars at the bottom. And I'll say arguably our most important foundational pillar, you'll see this little creep of the pillar on the right-hand side, is our common data model. That common data model is exclusive and contextualized to each organization, essentially. That is the data that is not part of the LLM. It is part of your business. That is where we want to be able to focus eventually, because that is what's going to drive these guys around your ability to leverage AI. Now, when looking at these pillars, there's a governance benefit, obviously policy alignment, streamlined auditing, the ability to have scale as well. Governance frameworks basically can scale more efficiently across these pillars. And it also brings innovation benefits, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, focused innovation. By breaking these M365 pillars, it basically encourages innovation within each domain, allowing teams to explore new solutions and technologies that are tailored to their specific area. Now, Copilot isn't just one application. I'm sure everybody realizes at this point there is more than one Copilot, so to speak. There's essentially a Copilot for every Microsoft Cloud experience. That means that Copilot is tailored for the application that you're currently utilizing. The contextualization around that, also known as a narrow AI, basically provides the ability to facilitate the contextualization around that application, but also around you. So we have approximately 6, maybe 7. That number of copilots is going to increase as additional copilots are rolled out. This morning, Microsoft announced that there will be a copilot for Purview that is being rolled out in September. Very excited about that reveal. We'll be touching on that a little bit as well in one of our slides. So let's talk about the capabilities for M365. When it comes to Copilot and your familiarization with the M365, when we consider where we're going to be utilizing Copilot, we're going to look at each application really, really quickly. Word facilitates the ability to draft with Copilot and chat and summarize. Now, I've got an example of that I'd just like to pull up really, really quickly. And we'll talk through Word. I'm going to ask Copilot really, really quickly. I've got a sample RFP right here, and I'm just going to quickly ask Copilot to summarize this RFP for me. And while that's working in the background, it'll take a moment. It's pulling things together. It's going to summarize this document for me really, really quickly, so I don't have to basically go through the entire document. I'm getting a clear idea from Copilot with regard to what the purpose of this is, what its scope is, and what's required from a qualification and a proposal perspective. Now, this RFP actually came from my email. If we switch back to our Copilot capabilities, we've just taken a quick look at Word and we've been able to chat and summarize a document, but that document actually originated from somewhere in the depths of my email. Now, I'm using a consultant account that is contextualized to my activities, but I'm just going to ask Copilot really, really quickly to summarize. And what Copilot's going to do is it's going to look at every email where I am mentioned. And we've got some example emails that we've basically generated within here. And it's going to hopefully find a few things where I am mentioned, of course. I'd like to find the file that references an RFP as an example. So it's going to gather resources, and what it should do is it should basically look and find this instance. And there we go. It's combed through my email, it's looked and basically identified that there's a proposal that is waiting, and it's done a fantastic job of summarizing that for me. So let's look for that that response. We have the ability to basically now look at that. I'm going to copy that text. You can see it's been copied to my clipboard. What I'd like to do now is actually switch back into our Copilot, and you can see we've got a Copilot site, what we're calling kind of a center of excellence for Copilot, how you look at rolling Copilot out within your organization. There's a site that we've created that is basically a template that can be rolled out relatively quickly within the organization. It's got all the relevant links that you're basically looking for. So I'm just going to come into Copilot chat now really, really quickly. And you can see Copilot's got a history of my conversations that I've been having as part of this demonstration. We're going to touch on that again in a second. I want to come back to my email, and I'd like to see this RFP email. So I've just done a quick search, and there it is. You can see I've got this response right there. I've been asked to reply. So I'm going to let this organization know. You can see we've already responded. I'd like to get a summary of that response. So I'm actually going to reply all, and I'm going to ask for a summary really, really quickly. And what I want to do is basically draft a response. So you can see we've already drafted that response. We've let them know that we're going to be responding, but I'd like to express and confirm a deadline. And then I'm also going to express some enthusiasm around that. So let's take a look at what Copilot's generated for me. Really, really quickly, it said, thank you for sending the RFP for our implementation. Please let me know if there are any changes that you'd like to make. Let's look at our filters. And you know what? I'd like to make this sound a little more formal. So it's going to take a look at that. Okay, we've now got a formal response. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to keep it, and then we're going to hit send. So really, really quickly, without me having to necessarily perform any wordsmithing, I've been able to respond to an RFP response with regard to that deadline really, really quickly in a clear, succinct, and professional manner. I'm going to switch and talk a little bit now around the capabilities again. I just want to switch back to our deck. We're going to take a deeper dive around Teams, some personal experience that I've had recently. What have we just done? We've just taken a quick look in Outlook and we've drafted a response. We've gotten a summarization and we looked at some coaching tips around that email. We're going to take a focused look at Word in a second, but before we switch back to our demonstration, I just want to talk a little bit about the AI-powered organization and what it means to be an AI-powered organization. Now, the promise of AI is real, and it will rewire every part of our organizations and transform the way we work. But getting there is going to require a plan. Now, Microsoft have outlined what they call 3 steps. In order to become an AI-powered organization, these 3 steps are foundational productivity, the adoption of generative and narrow AI, such as Microsoft Copilot, which is the bulk of our discussion today, and then the desire to become a high-performance organization. Now, foundational productivity, this is the tactical portion. There are some things you're going to want to have in place before you roll Copilot out. There are some requirements that Microsoft wants you to meet before you roll Copilot out. Now, that is to basically ensure that you are protecting your data and your organization's information. There are a number of aspects and services that are pre-configured and are configured as you activate features and services in order to ensure that you have protection. So our foundational productivity, what does that mean? That basically means that you're leveraging certain devices, such as a Surface, OEM, and you're leveraging Windows 365 and 365. You have the Windows 11 operating system. You're leveraging, for security perspectives, you're leveraging Defender and Purview. For device management, you have Intune and Windows Auto Patch. For collaboration, Teams, Teams Phone, Teams Premium, and Microsoft 365 apps have been rolled out. That is basically the definition of what a high-performance organization that has adopted a data-driven continuous improvement methodology looks like to Microsoft. So in short, becoming an AI-powered organization means integrating AI into the core operations and strategies and decision-making processes for your organization. That takes foundational productivity to strategic integration. Now, when we're talking strategic integration, that means you need vision and leadership, meaning senior leadership has embraced AI as a critical component to the organization's vision and strategy with clear goals and objectives that have been set for their AI initiatives, and that they are aligned with business outcomes. This is a cultural shift and requires the fostering of a culture of innovation and experimentation where AI is actually seen as a tool for enhancing capabilities rather than a threat. Encouraging continuous learning and upskilling in AI and data literacy among employees is critical. That provides for data-driven decision-making. That means you need data infrastructure. A robust data collection, storage, and management systems are established. Data governance policies ensure that you have quality data and secure and data that is secure and compliant. We can use analytics and insights that basically provide actionable insights from that data to extract from. We can now use AI to employ and identify patterns, trends, and opportunities that previously were not evident through our traditional discovery analysis, which leads into operational efficiency via automation and enhanced capabilities such as customer service via chatbots, marketing via predictive analytics, HR, talent acquisition and assessment of that talent. But it also provides for a fantastic customer experience, something that is at the core of Atlantis and our mantras. It's all about the personalization and being able to leverage AI to provide a personalized experience and make recommendations to our customers. We use AI-driven insights to understand what our customer needs and their preferences are in a much better and more efficient way, which leads to improved customer engagement through tools like chatbots, virtual assistants, etc. That high-performance organization basically functions as an innovative and provides for a competitive advantage. Whether that's around product or service, developing new AI products and services that address a market need and differentiate your organization from your competitors makes for a compelling argument. But it's also market agility. We can use AI to rapidly respond to various market changes. And over the course of preparing this conversation and preparing some of the demonstrations for this conversation, you'll see some of that in play, especially when it comes to risk management and compliance and our ability to use AI to predict and mitigate risks, whether those are financial, operational, or perhaps they're cybersecurity threats as well. Which leads into the ethical AI use, which is my personal favorite. Microsoft are using something called responsible AI. The practices around that, they're providing ethical guidelines and frameworks to ensure that there's fairness and transparency, as well as accountability to address potential biases in AI algorithms. That provides our continuous improvement via feedback loops. Scalability, now the ability to scale these AI solutions that are going to grow and change with the organization. We're able to leverage scalable infrastructures and platforms that basically support these AI initiatives. So being an AI-powered organization means harnessing the power of AI to drive your strategic goals, enhance operational efficiency, and deliver a superior customer experience. That provides for innovative products and services and allows us to manage our risks while maintaining a culture of continuous improvement via ethical AI use. Now we're deep in what's called the hype cycle for AI. This is the hype cycle is from Gartner. It was something that was previewed, I think, way back in 1995. I'm showing my age a little bit, but that's fine. And if you just take a moment to look at the hype cycle, we'll look at the innovation trigger, but we'll also look at this slope of enlightenment and where we're leading into the plateau of productivity. Now, the innovation trigger, if we start there, you can see Copilot is at this innovation trigger. What does that mean? It means the innovation trigger's characteristics are a technology breakthrough, which is kicking off the cycle. Now, early proof of concept stories like we're seeing in the media interest have triggered significant publicity around this product. What does that mean? That means this technology is positioned at the beginning stage of its development and is generating tremendous interest and initial implementations. Now, our peak to inflated expectations, you'll see narrow and generative intelligence right at the peak of that. That is what I was demonstrating previously. If you cast your mind back to just the creation of a summarized email and the summarization of that email, the response that we'll build to the RFP as well. Now, the peak to inflated expectations, that will drop off relatively quickly as more people adopt Copilot and utilize and come to understand its function in the everyday sense. The best way to utilize and understand Copilot is to use it every day, essentially. So this narrow and generative intelligence will quickly move through the trough of disillusionment and up through that slope of enlightenment. But there's a number of current focuses that most organizations are looking at that have led us to be able to get to this point. Now, our peak of inflated expectations, the characteristics around that are basically early success stories that are generating the hype around an expectation. However, many projects that come out of that peak to inflated expectation, they may not deliver on the promise, and that may lead to some failure. Now, that's okay. That is to be expected as part of this hype cycle. One of the comparisons that I like to use is consider cloud computing. 10, maybe 15 years ago, the concept of the cloud was an innovation trigger. But now that is mature technology and is, basically standard throughout most organizations at this point, either today or tomorrow, or the plan to actually get there because of the capability of the cloud platform. Copilot's really not any different. Whether you're in that early adoption phase or that late adoption phase, what you'll find is 5 years from now, the conversations that we're having around the utilization of Copilot is likely going to be very different. The narrow focus will switch to what's called a general focus, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we progress. So that is our AI development cycle. I just want to highlight data analytics for the slope of enlightenment, and I've placed fabric within a parenthesis there. Now, fabric itself is not at the slope of enlightenment yet. However, data warehouse, data lakes, what's now being termed as lake houses as well, which I believe is also starting to move through that peak to inflated expectations. Now, why would I place fabric there? I'm placing fabric there because when we look at the capability of fabric and its ability between data lakes, data warehouses, and its ability to integrate that data, I firmly believe that these two pieces of technology are going to play an extremely important part in moving really, really quickly through this AI development hype cycle and proving the value of this Copilot platform. So let's take a deep dive into Microsoft Copilot. I'm going to talk a little bit.
Sorry, don't mean to interrupt you. I'll just jump in with a couple questions since we're at this breaking point in between the topics. So we had one quick one from the audience, which asks, has Microsoft stated when Copilot for SharePoint will be generally available?
Great question.
I tried to take a look. I don't think there's been an announcement, but you can maybe confirm.
There hasn't been an announcement yet. However, I'm going to talk about something really, really quickly. You can, and pictures are worth thousands of words to me. You can, I'm going to set the stage before we get super technical. Essentially, you can deploy that today, right? So is it generally available in SharePoint? No. However, I have an open source background. I'm a big believer in open source. If you'd have told me 20 years ago that Microsoft would be the #1 contributor to open source, I would have laughed. However, Microsoft is the #1 contributor to open source. So they have this SharePoint SSO component, which is basically your ability to integrate into SharePoint. When we look at that announcement, and again, pictures are worth thousands of words to us. When we come to Copilot and take a quick look, Copilot's general announcement, I'm going to go into our studio right here. And what you can see is we have this coming soon. That's basically the only announcement they have. However, if you go to the open source GitHub repositories, you can see what's being built. So this is a SharePoint SSO component. I've got a quick example that I'd like to share really, really quickly. I've started that integration with our instance within this site. And I'm just going to show you what that looks like really, really quickly. So essentially what you can do is you can bring in a Copilot as a single page application. And that's what this is. In order to facilitate that, currently, what you have to do is you have to provide some authentication mechanisms. So in short, There's no announcement date as to when it's going to be generally available in SharePoint, but if you want to be at the forefront of innovation, you can basically build one of these guys today using some open source code that Microsoft provides, and you essentially compile this instance into a package, and you can deploy that through the app catalog in SharePoint. Hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. One thing I do want to mention is when you look at how you implement the security around Copilot, you want to be very, very cognizant of that. And what do I mean by that? I mean this screen right here. So in order to be able to do that in a secure manner, you'll see I've got basically 3 apps that function in order to provide a single, what's called a single page application in SPFX for SharePoint. We want to use cert-based authentication. We also need to provide a Copilot canvas that will be embedded in the page in SharePoint. And then basically our authentication mechanism, which you see right here. So when you first look to utilize the chatbot within the context of SharePoint, you have to use a login protocol. One second, I want to prove that this does work. May have had a refresh. And what I should get is I should get a code. And there you go. So that experience in SharePoint is basically going to be this for now, where I have to provide a code back. That code is just going to go back to Azure Authentication and say, hey, now it knows that I'm authenticated through that app. I can now start responding. So hopefully that provides some insights as to, it's not generally available today, but I'd highly recommend going and looking at the repos and just kind of leaning in. So Copilot for M365, when we look at the architecture, right? So this is basically a data diagram. And what I'd like to do right now is I would just like to actually bring up Copilot, if you just give me a second. And what we're going to do is we're going to follow along with that data diagram. Okay, so you should be seeing an instance of Copilot on my mobile device. What we're going to do is we're basically going to follow the bouncing balls 1 through 5. You can see we're at step 1, user prompt. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to say, now I've got contextualization. I'm going to say, I'm going to ask a question with regard to what have I been up to lately? Let's look at my previous Copilot chats, which you can see. And I'm going to say, what's the latest from Atlantis? Which you can see a previous dialogue that I've had, which was, a few days ago. But we're going to ask that same question, okay? So I'm going to come along and create a new chat, and I'm going to say, what's the latest from Atlantis? Now I can also put in a /, and I'm going to say, I want to know what's the latest from Atlantis Consultant Vancouver. And I'm going to hit send, and Copilot is now basically going to move through step 2. Now, step 2, it's assessing, it's basically going through the graph. It can optionally go through some other services as well, depending on how you've configured some of your service connections. It's not too different from the Power platform with regard to connectors, et cetera, and it's basically sent that to the graph and other services for grounding. Copilot then sends what's called a modified prompt to the LLM. Now, this LLM is essentially ChatGPT 4 in the background, but it can also be any other LLM as well. So it's not just constrained to single LLMs. There's a fantastic white paper out there called Project Orca, where Microsoft are actually working on the ability for other LLMs to conversate with other LLMs. We'll get into that in a minute. Now, but what I want to draw your eye to is this RAI. What's RAI? RAI is responsible AI. So basically, this is now been transformed, and it's looking to how to provide a response back that is responsible and ethical. Now it's got our response, so now we've gone through our modified prompt, we've stepped through step 4, we've got our response. I can look at this response. So a couple of hours ago, Atlantis consultant, modified a file titled Copilot. About an hour ago, they worked on a proposal response. So you can see it's real time and very accurate and descriptive with regards to the activities that this particular account has previously been doing. It's returned that response, and now it's passing through graph and, most importantly, compliance and purview to ensure that the response that is provided is not out of compliance or is revealing any sensitive information with regard to that response. And I've got a demonstration around that as well, which we're just about to switch to. So that is basically the data flow diagram in real time as well with Copilot running through a mobile device. Now, when looking at Copilot, when we've looked at our Copilot demonstrations, we've basically demonstrated narrow generative AI, and we also looked really, really quickly at Copilot Studio with the question that was asked with regard to the general availability into SharePoint. That was this guy. What I'd like to do is just kind of show what Copilot Studio looks like really, really quickly. Now, Copilot Studio, I've got a Copilot demo right here. You can see I've got a knowledge source, which is essentially pointed at this site. So it's only utilizing that site for its information. 1 second while I switch back. We spoke a little bit about the security, and I showed what that looked like in the background in Entra. But really what it comes down to is what and how are you going to authenticate? So in order to integrate with with SharePoint Online, basically we've authenticated manually, but you can choose to also have no authentication, or whether you want to just simply authenticate with other ID capabilities such as Teams and Power Apps. And I'll show Copilot in Teams towards the end as well. But when we look at Copilot, it's really based on a number of things. It's based on its knowledge, its topics, its actions. Its actions are really, really intriguing to me because we're into a very familiar interface, such as Power Automate. It's not too different from your everyday productivity tools, such as Power Automate, such as Logic Apps, for that canvas for how you actually build out actions for bots to be able to take actions. In my opinion, it's one of the reasons that the Graph API has been built in the way that it's been built as well. Yes, humans will consume the Graph API, but I firmly believe that the Graph API is there as a benefit for us and our AI assistants that are going to be able to run off and perform actual activities and tasks on us, not just for us, not just generating content for us as time goes by. Now, right now, those need to be built out by humans. So when we look at that overview, you can see we've got our knowledge source. We can add a number of knowledge sources. That can be the Dataverse, public websites, manually uploaded files, SharePoint and OneDrive. We can also connect to, using connectors, a number of other data sources as well to inform that chatbot. When it comes to topics, I've just got one quick example around how we trigger topics. You can see Copilot's immediately asked me for my name. I'm going to say my name is Julian, but it's also going to give me an interesting response. So now it knows what my name is. If we just give it a second, it's going to say, how would I prefer to communicate? Now, if we follow through, um, and look at these topics, you can see topics provide for a tremendous amount of capability. And what all I'm highlighting here is what are Atlantis's business hours as an example. We've all interacted with bots, on the web. However, the differentiator for these types of bots is, as mentioned, its ability to take an action as well. So I'm going to say, hey, my preferred method of contact is via email. I'm going to give it my email address really, really quickly just within this context. But then I'm just going to ask a simple question. I'm going to say, once it's provided that, we're going to look at what's called an adaptive card. Adaptive cards are extremely powerful. You can have conditions and perform basically a number of capabilities around the design canvas. So if we come back and I say, let's look at asking a question such as, find my nearest Atlantis office, it's basically going to go through that talk track. Oh, interesting. It actually hit the conversational boost, which I wasn't expecting, but as is always, surprises are surprises. So let's start with, when are you open? And there you can see we've got our response. Kind of strange that it didn't give me my response off of example 2. I wanted to show example 2, but that's fine. You can see we've got our adaptive card. When we look at our adaptive card, when we look at the properties that are involved in that, it's essentially JSON. Most of the communication that is happening around Copilot is going to be in a JSON format. And we're actually going to take a deeper look at what it means to build these cards out using GitHub Copilot. What's really interesting to me is the ability to embed links as well via adaptive cards. So we can now basically link in, provide information back. We've got branch-in logic and a tremendous amount of capability as well. It provides analytics, and that is Copilot Studio at a really, really high level. Just want to come back. We're going to finish with my personal favorite, which is GitHub Copilot. I'm a technical by nature. I do interact quite a bit from a business perspective, but I do want to have a conversation around GitHub Copilot as well. When we look at the logical architecture, we spoke about the ecosystem over here. We spoke about what it means to be a high performance organization that is leveraging AI, but really it comes down to this right here: the users and devices within your organization, how narrow AI is being utilized across your product suite, how Microsoft Copilot can basically enable your good workers to become great, your average workers to become good through that Microsoft graph into your organization's data, wherever that organizational data is living, whether that's OneDrive, Exchange, SharePoint, Teams chat, and a myriad of other areas, as mentioned, via those connectors that we should be familiar with through the Power Platform. A little bit of philosophy. Now, understanding what Copilot isn't is just as important as understanding what it is. And when I say, what are you? And I will be what you are not, what I really mean is we are human, and Copilot is not. It doesn't need breaks. It doesn't need to go for a coffee. But I want to highlight what it is not. It is not a replacement for your human judgment. It is not autonomous. It is not an autonomous decision maker. It is basically assisting you by providing suggestions and insights. Human oversight is going to be required, meaning users must review and validate its outputs. Consider it to be having access to arguably one of the most intelligent beings on the planet. It's become one of my go-tos for basically driving conversational UI through conversational UI, understanding what are my customers' needs, what are some of the best approaches that I'm going to be able to facilitate and enable that in a very quick manner. It's also not a standalone AI system. It's an integrated tool. That means there's a dependency on the Microsoft ecosystem. And it's not a perfect solution for all tasks. It's not a substitute for specialized software. It's playing basically a complementary role to existing tools and workflows, but it should be used alongside, other specialized software when needed. And we'll talk about that a little bit. It's not a human-like AI. It does have limited conversational abilities. When you compare that to other tools that are available on the market, how you interact, Copilot is very task-orientated. It's primarily focused on providing you with assistance. It's also not a one-size-fits-all solution, and it's not a security or a privacy tool. Copilot's not designed to be a security or a privacy tool because it operates within the secure environment of M365. If you cast your mind back to that ecosystem, that means it's not a substitute for comprehensive security solutions and practices. Now, as per that data flow diagram, if you cast your mind back to how I was walking through that demonstration, the data flow that Copilot uses, it uses data from within M365 to function, but it does not independently handle secure data. Now, I'm more excited to talk about what it is. It's an AI-powered productivity tool. It coordinates large language models, content in Microsoft Graph, and M365, tools that you use every day, as we highlighted. There are a combination of LLMs and algorithms that basically use deep learning techniques and vast data sets to basically understand what is occurring within your organization, so that it can summarize, predict, and then generate content based on that. And it learns along with you as well. I've got an example of that. So it can help you with content generation, text writing and editing, email composition. It can also help you with data analysis, whether that's Excel assistance, data summarization, task automation as well. Copilot can run off and automate some repetitive tasks through that workflow optimization, as I was showing in the tool. It's also got enhanced collaboration. So if you're using things like Loop, it can have real-time suggestions for you. It can summarize meetings. It's always contextually aware as well. Now, from a security and compliance perspective, Copilot is adhering to Microsoft security and compliance standards, meaning that data and privacy and the regulatory requirements around that are already embedded. So Microsoft are basically facilitating and enabling through their assessments within Purview, the compliance checks to ensure that documents and communications comply with organizational policies. And it's grounded in your business data. Now, to give you an idea of the evolution of that, I just want to switch back really, really quickly. I had a number of demos, based on the questions that would be put forward. But one I want to highlight is I have this sensitive document right here. Now, this document wasn't originally sensitive. I just want to draw your eyes to, I've got an example label right here called Copilot Confidential. And I've got the history of our conversation around this. Now, obviously, this is a sensitive document, and there's an associated sensitivity label that is prevalent within that document. But before that was applied, I had a conversation with Copilot, and I'd just like to share that. So when we look at when the original question was broached on the 12th of July, I asked how much within the context of the document, right? So within the context of the document, I asked, how much does our CEO make? And it responded. Now, I would like to actually switch back to this instance of Copilot. Now, keep in mind, we're talking about narrow AI, right? Contextualized AI, meaning I'm in the app, it should be able to provide me with a response. Now, if we go back to when I asked that question on the 12th, I believe at 6:30 in the morning. Wait, it's this one. And this was really, this evolution has been really, really intriguing to me, as you can see through our conversations, through the conversation history. So when I initially asked this question, it said, I'm sorry, I cannot disclose specific salary details. However, here it is. Now, this is an example of the overshare that can happen with sensitive documents. Now, let's look what happened almost instantaneously when that question was asked a little bit later in the day, after sensitivity had been applied. Basically indicated that's considered to be sensitive and confidential. Now, I'd also like to highlight what has occurred since then. So let's just ask that simple question again. And now I'm in the context of that document, meaning it should be able to answer that for me. But if you notice, the policy enforcement is basically saying, hey, look, I'm going to look through that, but I know I should not give you a response to that, even though you are within that context. Okay. I just want to switch back to our slides really, really quickly and talk about something that is near and dear to all of the Atlantis consultants that are involved in working for people on the call or prospects that are perhaps on the call, is the customer experience. So we have customer experience in our system synchronization around AI, whether that is in systems of records, and you can see we've basically highlighted which pillars we'd be working in this particular area and where the benefits are typically going to be. You know, your systems of record through service management, through your marketing management, etc., through systems of engagement as well. You know, whatever those channels are within M365, we call it the customer 360. But it's really about these systems of intelligence. Now, the Internet of Things, IoT, obviously we can have a focus around where AI is going to be, but it's likely going to be in these two areas that we'll focus on. Wearables are going to be, I think, something in the future that are just going to, is going to explode as well. But the systems of intelligence, basically, because Atlantis has been an automation company for the better part of a decade, we are positioned to be able to provide you with that capability around your systems of intelligence via an AI adoption roadmap. Now, whether that's using core technologies in specific areas, or whether we're looking for AI solution areas, such as conversational or virtual bots, whether we're looking to optimize some process and some operations, or whether it is true just content analysis and generation, that leads into how are we going to apply that in your enterprise via the enterprise functions. Now, you'll notice when we look at outcomes, customer satisfaction is basically our #1 priority. However, we can look at cost reduction, asset optimization, and providing you with a competitive advantage. There's typically things that we'll want to address when looking at adoption for Copilot, and that is related to basically barriers to adoption. We'll perform a maturity assessment to understand where the enterprise is at. Now, obviously, the fear of the unknown is one of the biggest roadblocks and challenges that you're going to have, but also finding a starting point is going to be a challenge as well. We utilize a maturity assessment in order to be able to do that. When you look at where your company is versus where your competitor is and how they're leveraging AI, that can be a big differentiator for you. I want to come back to my personal experience. My personal experience, and then we'll just jump into questions. My personal experience has basically been through the utilization of Copilot GitHub. Now, when we look at Copilot GitHub, you'll notice I've got this little chat function that is right here. Throughout the course of the last few weeks, especially, conversations that have been occurring with Copilot for GitHub, from my perspective, from a technical perspective, have been what I'll call just absolutely time-saving. So when we consider and look at some of the primary functions and activities that that I would typically perform, whether that's looking at code, whether that's getting an idea, whether we're maintaining best practices, et cetera, you can imagine the volume of artifacts that I perhaps have to overlook or assist with. And that's switching through various languages, various technologies all of the time. Now, when we looked at our documents, let's say this RFP, it's best practices to use content types, modern content types. I just had a quick conversation with Copilot and asked it to basically generate a PowerShell script to build that out for me. And if I ask it to explain this, which is probably everybody's got their favorite prompt. My favorite prompt is that. I can look at things, I can look at code, I can look at YAML files, JSON, and it's going to give me insight to that particular piece, that particular function, that particular PowerShell script, whatever it is. It's also going to be able to help me build things out. So I just asked it a question around a PowerShell script. This PowerShell script basically creates a content type, that content type I just showed you in SharePoint Online. But it helped me to build this Python script really quickly as well. Now, if I ask it, what is this doing? It's basically explain this. Now, my Python skills are I'd say a little older. They need to be refreshed. Python was really hot 20 years ago. So you can see from my perspective, I now understand what this code is doing. I know how it's performing, what it is it's doing. When we look at Copilot Studio and the artifacts that it's producing, 1 second. We're actually able to look at this from a code perspective and analyze how the bot is doing. Is it doing its work in the right way? So that's my personal experience. I just want to leave you with one more example of how we're using that in a real sense. I recently finished a big rollout of Teams. I'm just going to reload that. The demo gods are never really with us all the time. So I'm now in the context of myself. I'm going to go into my Copilot team, and you can see I basically deployed a Copilot instance into Teams, and I can talk now with this bot about a particular implementation. Now, what that does is it saves our other consultants in our sales team a little bit of time, because they can now interact with this bot and just ask it questions around how this particular piece of technology was implemented, how does it work, et cetera, et cetera. So if I were to ask, some high-level questions, rather than having to come and see Julian, I can basically say, hey, tell me about the request a team app as an example. And that is saving myself a little bit of time, because now the team can basically say, hey, tell me about this app. This app can give me some, it can give me some insights. If people are having challenges with the app, I can give some examples of how to solve particular problems. So I'm going to say, hey, I just asked it, hey, the request a team app, what is it about? I got a different response, I think, because I had a previous instance in there. The check availability button for me isn't working. It's grayed out. How do I resolve that? Well, I need to make sure that it's the field has been populated with a name for that team. Okay, did that answer my question? Yes, it did. So when you look at how you're leveraging Copilot, my personal favorite is by providing Copilot with your project data, it's able to answer and provide the rest of your team with some insights around the application without them necessarily needing to come to you. Okay. So in short, my favorite prompt, explain this. I'd like to open the floor for questions.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much, Julian, for presenting. We do have a few questions. So you touched on security. Maybe you can just talk a little bit about any of the security considerations that an organization might need to have in place before they deploy Copilot, and if there's any considerations for managing sensitive data in that regard.
Great question. So Microsoft is going to help you with that right out of the gate. There, as I demonstrated, there are things that you want to take into consideration. However, I just want to point you to what gets created automatically when you roll out Copilot. Basically, it's called a Microsoft AI Hub, and it discovers sensitive prompts via your AI assistants auto-magically, as I like to say.
Cool.
Great
Thank you
stuff.
for sharing that. This one is a little bit specific, but we'll put it out there. This
Okay.
person said, we are currently running a pilot of 8 users, and we do not have a license for Viva Insights for Copilot Analytics. Should we wait until Microsoft makes it free sometime later this quarter, or do you recommend getting a license in the meantime?
I recommend getting a license. Now, why do I recommend getting a license? Because how do you understand what your probability of adoption is going to be? I think it's fantastic that you've got a pilot and that you're looking at basically enabling that within the organization. But what you want to really be able to do is you want to look at the trends. You want to be able to look at what is occurring within your organization for adoption of the tool. Now, I only have one example in here. You have 8, right? But basically what that's going to provide for you is there's 2 areas you can look at. You can look at your usage summary for Copilot within M365, and then you can basically look at the adoption by the app. Now, what that does for you is, one second. What that does for you is it basically gives you an idea and the clarity as to how successful you're actually being and what does your readiness for the product actually look like. So hopefully that answers the question. If it was left to me, you're looking to be an innovator. I think it's fantastic that you've rolled out to 8 users. You're going to get a lot of data around what the probability of success for utilizing that product suite is going to be. Okay.
Fantastic, thanks. And that's a really nice tie-in actually to the offer that we have alongside this webinar. So of course, if you have any other questions, you're welcome to reach out to us. We'd be happy to discuss one-on-one. But we also have an offer for that one-day Copilot workshop. We'll be able to help identify areas where if you're not sure how Copilot can benefit you, where's the best places to implement it, we'll be able to help you assess and identify those areas and then help you roll out a plan so that you can make the most of Copilot and really help to streamline your productivity, increase your employee engagement, and get the most out of Copilot. I'd also, and actually, I'm sorry, I should mention as well that a link to book that webinar, or pardon me, that workshop is in the chat. So feel free to fill the form and we'll get in touch with you right away to get that scheduled. So we'd be happy to chat with you further. One other thing to mention would be our upcoming webinars. So the next one in our series will feature one of Elantis's customers, which is the City of Medicine Hat. You'll hear directly from the city about how they're using Microsoft to improve their productivity and collaboration and how they're pushing towards maturity within the Microsoft 365 platform. So you definitely don't want to miss that one. It'll be a great showcase of how, real life scenarios from one of our customers. And the link for that registration will also be in the chat for our audience members now. If you'd like any more information, of course, feel free to reach out to Elantis. You can also follow us on social media and subscribe to our newsletter so that you don't miss any of our upcoming events. After this webinar, we'll share the recording as well as some of these materials so that you have access to them for future use. And thank you again, Julian, for presenting and everyone who's attended today. Have a great day.